Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm down here at my pier and I'm going to be installing a ladder. We've had this pier for, I guess, going on about 9 years now, and I don't normally swim down here on purpose, but there have been a number of occasions where I've had to go in the water to pick something up that felt like a tool. When I was putting the roof on the boathouse here many years ago, I actually dropped an entire panel of roofing metal, dipped under the surface in 8 feet of water, and I had to go swimming to get that. And so there's these random situations where I find myself in the water, and getting back on a pier can be a challenge without a ladder, especially if it's low tide. I mean, there can be like a 5-foot difference between the surface of the water and the deck of the pier. So after all these years, I figured it's finally time to put in a ladder. One of the challenges with pier ladders is that you really want to get them out of the way. You want to get them out of the water when they're not being used, otherwise they'll build up barnacles. They could get tangled up with something floating in the creek here, a log or a limb. If there's ever high water during a flood or a storm, there's a lot of that stuff moving around, so you want to be able to get the ladder pretty much out of the water when you're not using it. So I found a ladder that one of my neighbors down the creek used. It's an Extreme Max sliding ladder made out of aluminum. It looks to be a good option, and I'll give a link to this below down in the description on Amazon. They had a pretty good price. I paid, I think, $205 for the 5-step version of this ladder. It seemed like a pretty good deal to me considering what you get. And so in this video I'm going to step through putting the ladder together and then installing it down on the pier. So stick around and we'll get started. All right, so first things first, whenever I come down here to do work, I usually try and get some fishing done at the same time. And we have crab season starting in a few weeks, and so I need to start building up some bait. Usually I try and catch catfish or whatever I can catch down here. When I'm not fishing with a pole, a lot of times I'll just put out a trot line off of one end of my pier, or I'll just hang some lines off the boat. And so that's all I'm going to do today. This is a kind of a really good way to cheat a little bit and fish while I'm getting some work done. And I've already hung a line off the back of the boat into the water. And I'll just put this one here off the front. And this is real simple. I mean, especially for catfish, they're not fussy. So this is actually just some old ham lunch meat on the end of the hook, and drop that down there with a weight on the end, and normally within 5 minutes I'll be catching fish. And so those can be working while we're tackling that ladder project. All right, so here we have the ladder as it's shipped. Comes pretty well packed in a box and wrapped in plastic inside. In addition to the ladder, there's a box of hardware, some nuts and bolts, and some nice swedged stainless steel cables. In fact, all the hardware is stainless steel. The ladder itself is aluminum. Then we got instructions, and then a little contact card in case you need help and need to contact the company. And here's the ladder unpacked. I just went through everything, looked at everything. Really nice quality, nice welds. And one thing I noticed that jumped out at me is that this appears to be anodized after fabrication, which means all the welds, all the cut ends, all the insides of all the aluminum parts are going to have anodizing on them, which is good. That's a kind of a big feature, a good thing to have to resist corrosion in the long term, as opposed to taking pre-anodized parts and then cutting them, fabricating, welding. You never quite get as good protection when you do it that way. All right, so I'm going to work through some of the assembly up here near my workshop where I have tools, and that'll avoid carrying lots of parts down to the pier. I'll just really have a couple major parts to carry down. So the first thing I've done is started to attach the handles to this lower frame. This is what's going to carry the sliding section and then attach to the pier. And there's really just 2 screws that go through, one on each side, to attach these pieces. And so we'll put the second one on now. It's pretty straightforward. Just gotta work it up through the different pipes, put on a washer, then put on a nylon lock nut, and then snug it down. This appears to be metric hardware, so I'm going to be using a 10 millimeter wrench to snug this guy up. And these pieces sort of stay loose relative to each other. You're really just snugging that screw and nut to hold it in place, but the pieces do have some movement. And with a nylon lock nut, you'd really just need to get it far enough to engage the nylon bushing in the end of that nut, and that's enough. So that takes care of the lower frame and the handles. Now we'll move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step, really before I carry this down to the pier, is attach the safety cables. I've already done one on this side, and I'll start the one over on this side now. And these are just attached with a stainless button screw and another nylon lock nut. This stainless button screw uses a 4 millimeter Allen key. So get that started. Get the wrench in here. And it didn't say so in the instructions, but I'm leaving these screws a little bit loose because I think you do want the safety cables to be able to swing freely. I can always snug these guys up later on if it's called for, but for now I'm going to leave them loose. Okay, that's a good amount of looseness for now. So really at this point I want to carry this assembly and then the ladder section down to the pier. Just be easier to carry those in two separate pieces, and we can finish things up down there. Alright, so I got all the pieces down here on the pier. I've got the sliding section slid in to the lower section here. Really the last step of the basic assembly is to attach the safety cables up to this sliding section, and for that we have more stainless steel button head screws and nylon lock nuts. So I'm just going to get this here. That's fit through, started, and again 10 millimeter wrench and 4 millimeter Allen key to snug that up. I'm also going to leave this a little bit loose until I decide if I need to snug it. Alright, so that takes care of basic assembly of the ladder itself, and now we can move over and attach it to the pier. They in the instructions they mentioned they don't include hardware for attaching to a pier because every situation is different. In fact, they make this ladder to attach to, you know, pier, a dock, pontoon boat, all kinds of different scenarios. So it kind of makes sense they don't include that mounting hardware. I'm going to get it over in position and decide what the best way to proceed is going to be. All right, so now that I have this in position where I want it, I can see that I'll be able to pick up one of the main framing members of the pier with a lag screw with one of these. In fact, it's the rear holes, which is really where you want the most strength in terms of the loads that are going to be in this ladder. So I'm going to go ahead and use some structural lag screws for the back to get into that beam, and then I'll probably just use some shorter ones for the front to go into the decking, and that should be plenty strong, but we'll see. Really the trick here is not to drop the ladder in the water, because that would be crazy. So got some of these GRK structural screws ready to go. Get started. All right, the ladder's in. It seems really solid, really strong. And right now I've got it raised up about as high as it can go, and I've got about 6 inches clearance, and we're right around high tide here, so that's good. That's what I wanted. The ladder will be out of the water most of the time for typical tide cycles. So I'm going to lower it now, give it a test. So this is plenty strong. I actually can't go lower right now without getting wet. So it's got plenty of reach for a low tide, that's for sure. Feels like these structural screws have done a really good job holding it tight. I would say if you don't use structural screws, use hot dip galvanized lag bolts if you're going into a beam, maybe like a 5/16 or 3/8 lag bolt, or through bolted if you can, similar size bolts, and that should be plenty strong. So I think that's going to wrap things up for today. Thanks for watching.